Welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas, and today I have with me Adrian Jones. And I'm very happy to have you here, especially because I can actually pronounce your last name. I've screwed up the last name the last several recordings. So Adrian with Score. Is it Score? It's Score. I was going to say Score or Score-re, but okay, Score. So thank you for being here with us today. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks. Little known fact, the R in SCORE actually stands for reassurance, or reassurance in French.
A French company, so, right?
Yeah. 50 years old, headquartered in Paris, and I've been there for about 3.5 years now.
Awesome. And by there, you mean with SCORE, not in Paris, right?
Well, I moved to Paris in 2016, actually, and just moved back in August of last year. So I'm now based out of New York, but SCORE, like most reinsurance companies, is a global company. So we've got offices in 40 countries and we do business in 160.
Oh, wow. So it's more of a life company than a P&C company, right? Life is kind of where it came from?
Yeah, well, so we're about 57% life, 43% P&C. That's because there have been a couple of big acquisitions. So we're the largest life reinsurance company in the US. And we're number 4 globally amongst the reinsurers. Munich, Swiss, and Hanover are bigger than us, and then you've got Lloyd's and Berkshire that are slightly smaller.
So Berkshire Hathaway's their insurance division, which is several companies, is a little bit smaller than SCORE?
This is just Berkshire's reinsurance business.
Oh, okay.
So Berkshire as a whole is the second largest insurance company in the U.S.
Okay, I was gonna say because Geico is gigantic, and then you've got Gen Re and a few others. So okay, that makes sense. So you've had an interesting career in that you didn't come from insurance; you came from consulting, and also you've had some international experiences there, which is the kind of the main thing we want to talk about today. I was telling Adrian just before we started recording that the number one question we get at Insurance Nerds is how do I get an opportunity in London? And number 2 is how do I get an opportunity in reinsurance? So there seems to be this mystique around international assignments. And while I am foreign, I've spent my entire career in the US. I've never worked abroad. So I have no clue. So tell me a little bit about your career. How did you go from Bain Consultants? Like that's one of the big 3 consulting companies, right? Or one of the big name ones.
Yeah, McKinsey, Bain, and BCG are the 3 kind of global consulting firms, and then you've got the big accounting firms as well. There's some that are a little bit more specialized, like Oliver Wyman, which is actually a sister company of Marsh and Guy Carpenter. So there's quite a number of consulting firms out there. And actually, maybe if I can anticipate where you might go, consulting can be a great place to start if you want to do something globally, because that is the business model. They seek to bring in young people, give them really good experiences at the start, and they know that actually one of the key questions that young people ask is, how do I get to London? And what ends up happening is they say, well, you can't go to London because everybody else wants to, but would you like to go to Brussels? Okay. And you say, okay, let me find that on the map. Wait, what language do they speak there? And you realize that the answer is Flemish and French. And you say, okay, fine. I don't speak a word of either of those 2 languages, but let's go. And that's what I did in 2004, actually. That was my first international experience.
So that was early you'd been at that was so you were at Bain since 2001. So that was early in your career.
Yes, okay. I was 24 at the time, and I packed up, got on a plane with 2 suitcases, and turned up on a Saturday and went to work on Monday, and ended up.
So what was that an assignment with an insurance company? Because earlier I was gonna make the joke that so you're 24 years old, right? You got your bachelor's from Wharton, right? So big school, big name school. you get your job at Bain, like you've made it. You're a consultant. You're getting the air miles and the big salary, working 80 hours a week. How do you fall from that? Like what led to your fall from grace? Ended up in insurance with the rest of us liberal arts majors.
Well,
and I'm being facetious. I love insurance, right? I spend all my time telling people how awesome insurance is.
What I didn't tell you is what I was doing in Belgium, which is I was working in the dog food business.
Oh, wow. So insurance was a step up from dog food. Okay, got it. Okay, so yeah, tell me about that assignment in Paris in the dog food industry.
I had a great time working in dog food, but the key client for us happened to enjoy spending time in Paris, and so we go down to Paris once a week to update him. So I started spending a lot of time in Paris, had a great time. Came back, did my MBA, and after my MBA, I stayed in New York. I then went to Stockholm, actually, with Bain. So it was another one of these just kind of random assignments. They said, well, you can't have London, but you can have Stockholm. And I said, great, I don't speak a word of Swedish. And they said, don't worry, you'll figure it out. So I went to Stockholm and did my thing there. I came back, actually, right before the financial crisis in 2008. And I went into the staffing manager's office at Bain, and she said, Adrian, get on a train, go to Princeton, New Jersey, go to this address and ask for Mr. Tallarico. And that was my introduction to insurance.
Princeton, Munich?
There happens to be a large insurance company in Princeton.
Well, that's not who you were chatting with? Or
Well, we're not supposed to reveal who our clients are, but
yeah. Okay. See, when you're talking about insurance nerd, give me a city in the U.S. I can pretty much tell you, especially the Northeast, which is my territory for Jacobson, I can pretty much tell you what insurance companies are headquartered there. And yeah, there's only one in Princeton. Okay, so you go to New Jersey where there's several insurance companies. Sorry.
Yes, I go to 500 College Road, Princeton, New Jersey, and see Mr. Tallarico, and he said, here's what we need to do. And I said, great, let's dig in and get it done. And so I spent several months there. That was my introduction to insurance. Then the Lehman crisis happened, and they sent me to work for one of Lehman's competitors, shutting down big portions of that business, which was, I didn't want to be anywhere else during the financial crisis than in a financial institution, but at the same time, it was pretty miserable work. And so I said, look, I'm happy to go back into insurance because it sure beat shutting down big portions of a bank. And so I started doing that, and I realized that I had done most of the industries in which Bain is active over the course of 10 years there. I had done most of the functional areas that they're active in, so most of the practice groups. And that was my goal, was to get that really broad experience. So this opportunity in Bermuda came along. It was through an executive search firm like yours. They called me up and I took the call. And by the way, I tell people you should always take every call that you get because you might learn something.
Especially from the recruiters.
Yeah.
Especially from the recruiters, yeah.
So I said, look, this is just like, whatever, like it's never going to happen, but like, fine, I'll toss in an application. I sent over my resume and one thing led to another, and June of 2010, I found myself down in Bermuda working for Bermuda Reinsurance Company. And
the
that
insurance was Neverland. I've never been to Bermuda, but I've heard that it's a magical place if you work in insurance.
You should go. It's even if you just go on holiday. It is an insurance company town. There's only 60,000 people on the island. 1,500 of them work for reinsurance companies in Bermuda, and then several hundred to possibly thousands others work for various support groups like lawyers, accountants, etc.
So almost 6 years in Bermuda. I don't know if you spent the whole time in the Bermuda office.
6 years in Bermuda. I had a great time. And then this opportunity with SCORE came along. I got it because I networked and I kind of knew what was going on. And so I called up some people at the appropriate time. I got the role in Paris and moved from Bermuda to Paris as head of strategy and business development for the P&C division at SCORE.
What was it painful to give up the Bermuda formal shorts and suit jacket? That's what I've been told, that they wear shorts to work because it's so warm.
Yeah, so when I got to Paris, the first day there, one of the people that was on my team said that she was going to get a particular technology installed and fully functional by the time of the US elections. And I said, that's never happened. These things never go on time, blah, blah, blah.
Uh-huh.
So if you do that, I'll wear Bermuda shorts to the office in Paris.
Okay.
So, needless to say, I lost that bet. And so in February, she decided to take me up on it. So there's a picture of me standing on a bench right behind me on this balcony overlooking the Arc de Triomphe, wearing a red jacket, red linen jacket, and Bermuda shorts,
Because
with the red knee socks as well.
right, that's right. The red knee socks, important.
Oh, yeah.
And so you got to wear that one day in February.
Yeah, and
Okay,
I have
that's
to
not
tell
too bad of a
everybody
bet.
it's because I lost a bet and we got our CRM system installed on time.
Yeah, systems going in on time almost never happens.
Yeah, I thought for sure I was going to win that bet, but anyway.
So apparently you heard it here first. The way to get that to happen is to bet that you'll embarrass yourself against the right person, and they'll make sure that the project is on time, 6 times over budget, but on time.
You know, and the French, it was on budget actually too, although that wasn't part of the bet. But you know, the French are a very proper, buttoned-up sort of culture. But actually, they appreciate a certain showmanship. And
Okay.
so, doing something that was a little bit silly, I think people appreciated that. It's not something that any French person would ever do. Let me put it that way.
I mean, you're American anyway. You were expected to be embarrassing anyway. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. So that's how you go to Score. So what have you been doing with Score?
I run a little venture capital fund for Score now, something that I set up when I was running strategy and business development a couple of years ago. We've invested in 8 companies so far. I should say we have either an investment or a strategic partnership with 8 companies, and oftentimes both. And these are companies mainly in North America and Europe. We've led several investment rounds. I sit on 3 boards in 3 different countries for our portfolio companies. And we're doing this in order to basically, we've got 3 things we're trying to do. One is to bring attractive risk into Score. So we back what we call the client of the future or the customer of the future. And we work to develop them from scratch into very successful, big, profitable companies. The second thing that we do is we try to bring technology into Score, which is useful for Score. And the third is we try to help make Score smarter about technologies that we can bring to our clients. And so we've invested in all 3 of those areas. And basically, I oversee this portfolio. And you could say that I have like an innovation sort of role as well. But for various reasons, I don't actually use the term innovation. But I do a lot of that, and I spend a lot of time talking with our clients around the world about what they're working on from a digitization and technology perspective, and how Score can potentially be useful to them.
Do all your friends from consulting make fun of you for ending up in insurance?
No, actually, they call me up and say, "Hey, Adrian, what's going on in InsurTech? Hear that some cool things are happening there."
Interesting. That's interesting. That InsurTech has become that big that it gets noticed outside of our little world.
Insurance is 6% of the global economy, so it touches every aspect of everything that anybody does, both personally and professionally, and people forget about this.
Mm-hmm. We get no credit. Yeah, we get no credit for how crucially important we are for the economy and for what an awesome career and how stable we are, right? I've been saying it I didn't start insurance until 2009, so I came in after the last recession, or kind of during the last recession. But I've been telling people it's one of the beauties of insurance is it's very resilient, very resistant to recession proof. And we're seeing it right now, right? There's been no.
I don't know that anything's fully recession-proof, but yeah, it's a great place to be in a
As much as you
downturn.
can be. Absolutely.
Because everybody still has to buy insurance, and we play a great societal role in these downturns as well, which is before the federal government can go throw money out of helicopters, we're paying our claims. And that's true whether it's this or an earthquake or a hurricane or whatever. Insurance companies are some of the first people who are on the ground after the disasters happened. They have big checkbooks with billions of dollars, and they just start writing checks. But you're not going to get a check if you don't pay for it, and that becomes the challenge that we face as an industry. And nobody wants to pay for it.
And even beyond that, like it's a product. It's a really psychologically, it's a really weird product. Because what other product do you number one, are you compelled to buy many times, and number two, there's a very, very good chance you get to the end of your policy, and you get nothing back, right? 95% of clients at the end of the year haven't had a claim, so it's psychologically so hard for them to think of you as anything more than a cost. Right, up until they have a claim and it goes well, but that could be decades before that happens, right? So it's such a challenging industry from that perspective. And I'm a PNC guy. I can only imagine with a life company, even though you're kind of on both sides of the company, but with a life company where literally the claim, right? It's decades before a claim ever happens with your average insured. So how do you keep a relationship with them, right? How do you provide value? How do you remind them of what they're paying for and why they keep you around? It's a fascinating industry.
But at the same time, life insurance is great because you buy it, and as long as you keep paying your premium, you forget about it. So you don't have to keep constantly reselling it. Think about it,
that's right. It's not the yearly renewal that PNC agents have to deal with, or 6 months renewal.
Right. So if you think about it, though, insurance is actually the largest annual expense for a lot of households. When you add the cost of health insurance, which can easily be $20,000 a year or more, oftentimes paid by an employer, but still, health insurance plus car insurance at $1,000, plus homeowners insurance another $1,000 to $1,500, plus life insurance, plus any sort of other insurance that you're going to buy for your pet or whatever. It becomes a very serious chunk of change. What else do you buy in a year that costs that amount of money that you buy every single year?
Every year after year after year. Absolutely. So your stints abroad. What was the most challenging part? So you get to Brussels, you get to Paris. What are the challenges that you knew would happen, and what are the challenges that you really had no idea?
So having worked across 5 different countries now, I think one of the key challenges that you run into is the efficiency or lack thereof of the government bureaucracy. You start to realize the culture of some countries simply by the way that you go about getting a work visa, the way that you get yourself established in the country and set up. So you learn that the French love paperwork.
Okay.
They love having little stamps and certifications and things like that. Whereas the Swedish love efficiency. With the Swedes, you go and you upload a couple of papers to the Swedish Migration Board's website. And then a little while later, they say, go to the consulate any day between these times and get your visa, and you're done. Whereas the French, you have to make an appointment at the consulate. And of course, the appointments are only available precisely 90 days in advance because they fill up. And so you have to have everything very meticulously planned for it to even have a chance of working in France. But that's just the way the French bureaucracy is. And God bless them, somehow it works. The country functions. Perhaps not as well as Sweden, but it functions. And then in Bermuda, you've got, actually a very small island with, a small handful of people that really handle everything. And it has much more of a small hometown feel. But paperwork can be one of the biggest challenges, frankly. Another challenge for Americans in particular, if you hold a US passport or a green card, you will continue to pay US taxes during your time abroad. You pay your local taxes in whatever country you are, and then you go back and calculate what your US taxes would be, subject to a couple of deductions and credits. But at some point, and it's not that high, you realize that you may actually end up owing the US government money even if you never set foot in the United States. So I encourage people before you take a role overseas, particularly if it's going to be paying you $75,000 a year or more, and that's total compensation, including housing allowances, including flights home, things like that. Make sure that you understand what the tax implications are, because it can really mess up your budget.
Interesting. I would have never thought of that. Okay, so talk to a CPA. So basically, like read between the lines, like you finish your first year working abroad, file your taxes, and you're like, holy crap, I ended up behind. This really was not a promotion in any way, shape, or form.
You got to look out for it, because they will give you, if you look at Bermuda, for instance, Bermuda is a great place for young people to go. You go there, you will probably make a significant amount more money there than you are right now. However, the cost of living is also substantially higher. And yeah, you're going to still pay U.S. tax if you're making more than, in the case of Bermuda, more than about $100,000 a year, which oftentimes in Bermuda you are, because they'll give you $2,000 a month for housing. They'll give you some money for a motorbike or something like that. So it might look like a lot of money, but you just have to be really careful that you understand, financially what it entails. And then you start adding flights home. You start adding, going out and playing golf, maybe getting a boat, things like that, and you realize actually you can blow a lot of money really quickly.
Interesting. I've heard that. Well, no, number one, if you stay for a long time, you as a foreigner, you can't buy property. And number two, don't expect to find the girlfriend. Bring the girlfriend or wife. Otherwise, you'll be pretty bored.
I got engaged to my wife 2 weeks before we went to Bermuda.
Oh, okay. And she came with you to Bermuda.
You can imagine the conversations that preceded this engagement. I'm assuming your boss in Bermuda was not a local, but in Europe, maybe they were locals. My boss in Bermuda was from Ohio, actually.
Okay.
So I know you're familiar with people from Ohio, and mm-hmm. And that worked out great. In France, in Paris, I've reported to French people, Victor Pignet and Sylvie Van Viet, who are well known in the reinsurance business. But yeah, they're French. They have a different way of thinking about the world. They're successful executives, and so they're used to dealing with people from a lot of different cultures. And I think that is one thing that often distinguishes people from smaller countries than the U.S. Is you just have to be much more internationally oriented from a much younger age. So speaking multiple languages, traveling more than we do in the States. And so you end up having to find a way to understand what the culture of your coworkers and supervisors is, adapt your behaviors to that culture in some ways, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to become that. For me, I don't even speak very good French. Fortunately, they all, the working language is English, and people are very generous at accommodating me, particularly when I'm the only English speaker in a 20-person meeting, which sometimes happens.
The whole meeting goes English.
Yeah, but one of the things that I find is, so first of all, there's a lot of places other than London. My wife actually has a British passport, but we've never ended up working in London for various reasons. But there's a lot of different places, and one of the important things is that you do find ways to understand and embrace at least certain elements of the local culture wherever you're going to end up. So in France, there's a few things that the French really value much more than Americans. So they value intellectualism, intellectual curiosity, history, philosophy, topics like that. And they will often open meetings or open discussions by talking about that sort of thing, which would just seem really snobbish and weird in the US. But it's very common there, or if you're going to lunch, for example. If you get sideways with someone in France, or your relationship goes pear-shaped, if I can use the British terms, you are wise to perhaps sit down to a nice lunch, enjoy some wine together at that lunch, and over that you start to bond and perhaps repair those relationships. So I embraced wine and food and intellectualism and art and culture and all of these things, and I think that was very helpful for surviving and thriving in a place like France.
Okay, so showing up in the Ford F-150 with the military gear and the what's it called, assault rifle wouldn't fly very well in Europe.
Well, so, when Thomas Jefferson lived in France, he lived not far from the scene right behind me here. And he would walk every day down to the Royal Palace Gardens, and he would wear his coonskin cap. And the French thought that was just the greatest thing. But he was Thomas Jefferson, I'm not, so I did never turn up in a coonskin cap.
Gotcha. What about the Scandinavian countries? I've visited. I found them to be gorgeous and expensive. What was the culture like? You talked about them being very efficient, but work-wise, what was the culture like compared to the American work culture?
I've got a lot of respect for Scandinavia or the Nordics, and you hear a lot of comparisons, particularly in political circles, of why can't America be more like Sweden or Norway?
Very popular comparison in the last few years, yeah.
Yeah, and when you go and spend time there, you realize that actually they're fabulous places. They're wonderful to live, wonderful to work, great places to raise children. But the U.S. is not going to become them. They're just different places. I think they've got some very good ideas, particularly on things like gender equality, for example. There's a much longer parental leave, and the parental leave has to be split between both parents, so it can't be just the woman who takes off. So actually, you see a lot of men walking around Stockholm pushing baby buggies. And this can be somewhat surprising to people. They're like, what are all these men doing pushing baby buggies at 2 p.m? And it's like, well, because actually they're taking their daddy days. And they have to, because otherwise the mom can't take her mommy days. So things like that I think are very admirable. I think it's a very straightforward place from a work perspective. The people, all these people are very friendly, particularly, if you're going to be working in one of these places, you're going to be working for an international company. And so you're going to find that actually, oftentimes people have studied in the States. They might have their degree from a U.S. university. They might be married to an American or married to someone from overseas. So you find that oftentimes the people that you're working with have a certain curiosity towards you, just as you do towards them. So I think that makes things a lot easier. But yeah, I mean, Stockholm was a great place. Bermuda was a great place too. Bermuda has people from all around the world, surprisingly. A lot of Canadians, a lot of South Africans.
Doing insurance.
Yeah.
Scandinavia, I was only there for a week, but I love the food. Reindeer, and what else? The reindeer was fantastic. But yeah, the food very different from anywhere else I've been.
Yeah, so I fly Finnair a lot back and forth to Asia, and Finnair, they serve reindeer on the plane. It's pretty good.
Awesome. So we have like 10 minutes left here. I'm curious, what advice do you have for a young Adrian type? What I mean by an Adrian type, the good student who is working on a fancy degree and planning on going into consulting?
Let me even take it back further. I grew up in Indiana. I was 21 the first time I left the U.S. First place I went was Paris, actually. I ended up doing a trip around the world. That was the first time that I left. I bought a round the world ticket and spent 31 days circling the globe.
That's awesome. You didn't even have a passport before? That is absolutely fantastic.
I never had my passport stamped before, and I just decided to go. And so I was in Paris, Madrid, London, Dubai, Oman, Delhi, Hong Kong, Singapore, Sydney, Melbourne, New Zealand, Hawaii. So unfortunately, I only had 31 days to do all this, so it was kind of packed in. But actually,
and were you by yourself?
Yeah.
That is fantastic. I'm imagining you like this tall, skinny, nerdy American kid, like not like the football player, but like the nerdy, skinny type from Indiana, doing a around the world trip as your first trip ever. That is a fantastic story. Okay, anyway, continue.
So just go. I mean, that's the first piece of advice. Like, stop thinking about it so much and just like find something to do.
Was your family shocked at this adventure?
Well, I didn't really ask their opinion. I just went. I think they were surprised that I could figure out how to do it, actually. But, I just spent a lot of time on the phone. This is 2001, so I spent a lot of time on the phone with the airlines, getting the whole thing to snap together. But, there's some pretty discounted round-the-world airfares that you can buy, so it's actually not nearly as expensive as you might think. Nowadays, with low-cost carriers, you can get from New York to Paris for $400 round trip.
Well, we're recording on May 1st of this our year one of coronavirus era. Right now, it's either very, very cheap or very, very hard to find the flights. Like
so in a pre-corona era.
And hopefully here later in 2020 or early 2021.
So I think my first piece of advice is just do it. Secondly is spend time networking with people who are based overseas and understand what their experience is and what sort of opportunities might exist, particularly if you have a particular place that you want to go. There are recruiters who are based in various foreign geographies that specialize in bringing in people who have some degree of skills and experience. So you need to be, for instance, a qualified actuary. They specialize in bringing them to these places where there are shortages of such people. Do networking, travel there, look for job opportunities that may appear on job boards or other places. Oftentimes, these sort of opportunities are not where you would expect them to be. But also, I think, look at internationally based companies. We tend to think of insurance in the U.S. as being a very U.S.-centric business. And in fact, if you look at the top 20 carriers in the U.S., 3 of them are based overseas.
Would that be Swiss Re, Munich Re, and Tokyo Marine?
So let me consult my little list here. So you might consider Farmers to be based overseas, but not really. So
they're owned by Zurich, yeah.
Yeah, so Zurich is number 12. Then you skip down to Tokyo Marine, which is 17, and then Fairfax, which is 20.
Fairfax is Canada.
That's right.
Okay, gotcha.
So if you don't consider Fairfax to be foreign, the next one is Canadian, Great American, and then number 23.
Great American's Canadian?
Yeah.
So Great American, they were Cincinnati-based.
Sorry. You're right. Different. I'm thinking of a different Great American. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Got you.
You got to go and edit that part out. You're right. You know what I was thinking? I was thinking Great Western.
Okay, got you. Yeah,
Great Western is owned by Power Corp.
Very proud insurance nerd.
AXA is 23, and then Allianz is 25.
Yeah, AXA is French. Allianz is German.
Allianz is German, also based in Munich. So, among the reinsurers, they're almost entirely foreign-based because U.S. tax and regulatory laws chased the industry offshore, or they just got acquired. but yeah, we think of insurance as being a very American sort of business, and in many ways it is. 75% of U.S. premiums are written by companies that are based in the U.S. and essentially operate only in the U.S. But that remaining 25 actually tends to be very global. What you find in other countries is much more global than the U.S. So if you go to somewhere like France or Germany, for instance, you're going to find the big American companies present, some big local companies, but those local companies are often, they've got tentacles all over the place. And in fact, many of them own insurance companies in the US. So one of the best ways to get overseas, if that's really your goal, is go work for one of those foreign-owned companies here in the US. They don't have the brand name of the U.S. companies. You don't even think about them. Sometimes you don't even realize, Philadelphia Insurance is owned by
Tokyo Marine,
for instance, as is
Yeah.
First Insurance of Hawaii and Houston and all these others. So look for companies which have overseas operations. Even some of the U.S. companies like Liberty Mutual, for instance,
has huge overseas operations. Yeah.
The Hanover and Worcester, Mass. used to own a big syndicate at Lloyd's.
Okay.
They don't anymore, but even some of these, what you'd think of as being relatively U.S. focused companies may have operations overseas. So look for those. And once you get in, spend a few years wherever you are, and then start talking to them about, okay, is it possible to spend a couple of years doing an overseas rotation or assignment? And in some of these companies, well, some of them they'll just tell you no because the operations are all very separate and independent. So this is something you need to understand when you're doing the interview process. But you might actually find that they say, actually, look, we think that it's very important. When I was a consultant, I worked for a company where you could not get promoted past a certain level unless you had spent time overseas.
Was that an insurance company?
It was actually the dog food company.
Oh, who would have thought? Very, very interesting. Yeah.
But they felt like in order to have a consistent global culture all around the world, it was very important that everybody had an overseas assignment, and it didn't matter where you were. You had to just work outside of your home country with them for some period of time.
Very, very, very interesting. And for the listeners or the viewers, if you are curious which insurance companies are owned by companies abroad, reach out to your friendly insurance nerd, whether it's me or Adrian, and we'll be happy to kind of give you a few hints here and there of companies near you or in your sphere that are foreign owned or have significant foreign operations.
So all right, so I have a question for you, Tony.
Absolutely.
I think that working overseas can be very good for one's career because you start to build an understanding of how the world operates. You start to see things that go on outside of the world where you grew up that you can bring back. I think it makes you a better executive as well because you start to work with a much wider variety, much more diversity in terms of the people that you're dealing with. It can be negative for your career though, because it takes you out of the stream of people that you've been working with. And puts you somewhere completely different, where you are a foreigner. And yeah, you got to get used to being the only one, being the minority now in the room. But it takes you out of this kind of comfortable stream that you might be in right now of a group of people who are just going to grow up and do business together, long into the future. So how do you, when you're, doing executive search work, how do you look at international experience?
So I need to be careful. I don't myself work on the executive search side of Jacobson. We are the largest executive search company in insurance. I sell our services, but I don't do the searches. What I have seen is that it varies a lot by the company. So some companies see it as a major plus. Some don't particularly care. I've never seen a search where it hurt, like where I've never seen emails going back and forth, or no, we're not or in the system. I've never seen notes saying decided not to submit this person because they spent so much of their career abroad. So it doesn't appear, from my perspective, it doesn't appear that it has a high chance of hurting you, it's generally looked at as a positive.
So
But
just go do it, right?
yeah, I really don't think that there's much to lose. And by the way, I'm a big traveler. Been to almost 60 countries, and I feel really grounded right now with not being able to fly. But even if you haven't had the opportunity to work abroad, travel. Like traveling will open your eyes to how the world works and how things are different, and you'll get much better at diversity just by traveling, just by dealing with people abroad, right? Just by seeing their culture, seeing how they live, seeing how they work. A trip to Asia can be particularly eye-opening. My first one was Hong Kong, and I loved it. Then we did Dubai, and I didn't love it as much as I thought I would. Beijing was very interesting, but not one that I would look at going back. And then Vietnam and Thailand. Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, kind of that Southeast Asia area is gorgeous and hot at all times of the year. Very, very warm. But it's such a different culture, and yeah, you learn so much by traveling, basically. So even if you don't have
let's talk about that, because there's different types of travel, right? Like there's the travel where you just go to some all-inclusive sort of place and you're in this like hermetically sealed bubble.
Makes no sense to me.
There's travel where you go and just spend your days smoking weed on Koh San Road in Bangkok. At least when I first went there, that's where all the backpackers went. To this like one little street, yeah, it was just full of foreigners and like internet cafes that catered to them. That to me is better than nothing, but still, you're not going to get a tremendous amount of exposure to understanding what people think.
For our younger listeners, an internet cafe was this weird thing before Wi-Fi, where you would go and pay for an hour of internet usage on their computer. And put your password for your email and stuff in their computer. Think about how crazy that is. Anyway.
So, I think I had some of the best exchanges with people when I actually just went and got on local buses and just started going places. And inevitably, people get curious about you. I remember sitting on the border of Armenia and Georgia talking with some Armenians about why they went to Iran and what they did there and like what's going on in Iran. And a little while later, I found myself in Dubai, actually, at a little cafe full of Iranian sailors who run these little boats into the center of Dubai at the time. It's largely cleared out now. But they just offloaded all their goods right in the middle of town. And the guys ended up at these cafes to drink tea and whatever. And we had a conversation in very broken English about how my president was on TV. And I remember one of them saying, "We don't like Americans, we just dislike your president." This is long before Trump, by the way.
Yeah, I was about to say, and that's back when we had a president. Back when both sides could argue about whether the president was actually good or not.
It wasn't that long ago, Tony. Come on. That was like my parents' era. I'm only 2 years older than you. Keep in mind.
I'm 37, so you're breathing down the like you have 40 breathing down your neck, basically, just about.
Yeah. So I was born in 1980. So by some definitions, I'm a millennial. So I'm a millennial when it suits my purposes, and
on the very edge. Yeah. On the very edge. Well, it's been a fun conversation. Different from a lot of what we do at Profils in Risk. It's nice to get an international perspective from an American, and also a little bit of a life insurance perspective. One last question I'm curious about. Nick and I just recorded an episode, it hasn't gone live, about our best guess on the way that the current crisis is going to affect insurance and especially insurtech. And Nick, his perspective is that the venture arms of insurance carriers will continue in investing through this crisis. My perspective was they were going to back out and insurers are going to have a hard time finding funding. what do you think? And I'm not asking for the official score version, right? Don't want to get you in trouble with your job, but what do you think? Will carrier venture arms keep investing through this crisis?
Yes and no. So both perspectives are right. If you back up, carrier venture arms have been very important for the most recent round of InsurTech, so kind of from 2015 onwards.
Mm-hmm.
There are at least 50 insurance and reinsurance companies that have done multiple deals, and there are more than 100 that have done at least one deal.
Oh, I didn't realize that it was that many. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, globally, it's big. Most of them have done it kind of in a, what I'd say, kind of a semi-professional way. There are some that have done it in a very highly professional way, and I think that those have a decent amount of staying power. But I think when you back up, they've been very important. So those 50 to 100, however you want to define it, have been on almost 50% of deals that were done last year in some way.
Okay.
And so therefore, most of the insurtech companies have at least one or two strategics on their cap table.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that this will continue going forward. It'll continue for a couple of reasons. One, the changes that insurtech is driving and the importance of research and development and the way that we do research and development, which is often to buy things once they're proven, that's not going to change. And so the companies will still want to be putting out, innovation efforts in order to secure their digital future and understand what's going on and engage with it before their competitors do. That will still happen. However, insurance balance sheets are likely to be weaker going forward. There have been reasonably significant investment losses. Some carriers have started to report some earnings losses as well. Rates are going higher. And so at a time of weaker balance sheets and higher rates, it makes more sense to start putting capital more towards underwriting. Which means often you can't invest that capital in long-term illiquid sort of plays like venture capital. Furthermore, I think you're going to start seeing at some point more share buybacks among insurers because the sector has been beaten up so badly. It remains to be seen whether that's in fact the case going forward or if it recovers. But if it doesn't recover, you might see more buybacks. Again, this is capital that's coming out of the system. And so I think what you'll see is a number of insurtech corporate VCs will start writing smaller checks, be more sensitive to valuation, more sensitive to strategic fit, perhaps less likely to lead, less likely to put in more follow-on money. And I think that will ultimately lead to there being less money flowing into insurtech from corporate VC, but by no means a stop. We're still open for business. I'm negotiating a deal right now. So things will continue. It just will not be in the sort of heady go-go way that was done up until a couple months ago.
Okay, so it'll in the aggregate, it'll slow down a little.
That's right. That's right. But I don't think it's going to stop. And I think it's going to be an interesting question if you fast forward a year from now. If you're working at a company that needs to raise money in a year or two, is the money going to be there? We don't know. We don't know whether people are going to continue to re-up their commitments to insurance venture capital funds or not. If they don't, I think you will see a number of investors who will come in and look to buy those assets for less expensive prices and they're perhaps trading out at their most recent round. That will ultimately, again, be good for the system. So a somewhat reset of some of the crazy valuations we've seen for certain insurtech assets. It is something to keep in mind from a career perspective. If you're looking to go to a startup, some of them are still hiring right now. Some of them are very well funded. They have big growth ambitions. Coverage year added up across 47 insurtech companies. They have about 6,000 employees before the recent layoffs. So there's a lot of insurtech nerds out there, if I can add to your phrase, insurance nerds. but you need to understand, how is the company capitalized? Who is backing it? How secure and strong are they? Are they going to be in a position to continue backstop it, to continue funding the company going forward? How far away is the company from profitability? Because a lot of your payment will be in equity shares, and you need to understand what those shares are, how much they're going to get diluted at future valuation rounds, et cetera. So I think that we may see a little bit of difficulty for the next 12, possibly even 24 months. But I think by and large, the sector will come through it, will do okay, and will ultimately be stronger when we get to the other side.
Okay. Well, Adrian, thank you for joining me on a Friday end of day after what I'm sure was a hard week of work. Great having you on the show, and look forward to see how things play out in the next year.
Anytime, Tony.
Such a crazy time we're living in. So thank you for joining us.
All right, thanks.